Hakari quickly became known as one of the coolest characters in Jujutsu Kaisen shortly after us meeting him. And this was because not only are his abilities unorthodox, but he's also just a really cool guy. The guy literally runs an underground fight club. While every other student is being taught curse techniques, taking part in events, Hakari is just out there, their same age, running a fight club and gambling. And not only does he do this, but he's also extremely strong. We saw that Yuta even said that Hakari, when on a roll, is stronger than he is. And I know that there's some contention about this statement. Some people think that Yuta was just downplaying himself, but there's also a promotional statement. And also I want to say before I show it, I did see this on Twitter, so take it as you want, that actually says that Hakari on a roll is stronger than Yuta. So it's also an outside statement not only from Yuta, but also from this promotional piece of information. So you can just take that as you will. But whether you think he's stronger than Yuta on a roll, slightly weaker than Yuta on a roll, it doesn't matter because his fights are always top tier and extremely interesting, especially the fight with Kashimo. But with the story developing as it is now, Hakari has to come in and do something. Because although it seems like Gojo is going to fight Sukuna and Yuta is going to fight Kenjaku, who is left for Hakari? You might think, well, Arame, and I honestly think that a fight between Hakari and Arame would be quick, not only because of the domain jackpot activation, but also because Arame just has no good feats outside of hitting people from the side. If you think about it, Arame is just a sneak attack merchant. Arame waits till people are fighting others and then just hits them in the side with ice. Also, Arame isn't portrayed as being one of the top tiers, you could say, like Hakari is portrayed as, especially the fights with Kashimo and the Yuta statement. So I don't see Arame being the final opponent for Hakari. And I know that some people think that Yuta and Hakari are going to go fight Kenjaku, and I'm actually going to do a video covering that matchup, Yuta and Hakari versus Kenjaku, and who would win that fight. And I honestly do think that this has a higher chance of happening than Hakari ending up fighting Arame. And there are just a few things about Hakari, not only his style, but his powers, that going into the end of the series, I honestly would bet on him in any fight he takes. Unless it's against Sukuna, of course. But I don't think Hakari's crazy enough to go fight Sukuna. But there are just things about Hakari that when you look at them, you realize that going into any fight, you honestly should just bet on him. So one of the first things to look at with Hakari is his jackpot ability that comes about through his domain activation. And after he hits a jackpot, he gains some of the most broken abilities we have seen in the series. One of them is automatic reverse curse technique that works around the clock on his body for 4 minutes and 11 seconds. So they even call him basically unkillable for this 4 minutes and 11 seconds. Although he can be killed, you just need to take his head off or blow his head up. And the reason this is because RCT comes directly from the head. So even though curse energy comes from the gut, reverse curse technique comes from the brain. So if you do destroy the brain in one hit or you just mush it, then the person's RCT will not go throughout their body and then they're basically killable. So although you can hit Hakari in like his limbs and he'll just regrow an entire limb, if you take his head off or destroy his head and mush it, then he'll just die. But just having that ability on its own is so broken because we see multiple times throughout the fight with Kashimo that he takes hits that should be lethal on any other sorcerer, but because of his ability, he is able to stay alive and ultimately win the fight. The first major instance where he's supposed to have died, you could say, is when Kashimo hits him with a lightning attack directly to his arm, and it takes Hakari's left arm completely off. Now, of course, under any normal circumstance, once you see that you've knocked your opponent's arm off, you go to attack them with more hits, right? Because your opponent's in a weakened state. But after Kashimo goes to do that, Hakari just kicks him in the face as he's rushing towards him, and his arm is just right back on his body. Now, of course, this freaks Kashimo out, but that's the point. He thought that Hakari was in such a weakened state by having an arm gone that he could just go bombard him. In reality, Hakari was fine the entire time, and that is why he attacked with a kick, because his arm just comes right back. The second instance, and this is like the most crucial time that this happens, is where Hakari's immortality basically wears off. The 4 minutes and 11 seconds of his jackpot state ends up going away. And while he's in his vulnerable state, Kashimo hits him with a lightning charged attack to his side, and it blows a gaping hole in Hakari's side. Now it looks like Hakari's pretty much done for because he doesn't have his domain up and he's not in his jackpot state, but as he's falling to the ground, Hakari just activates his domain expansion again, gets lucky and hits the jackpot. Now this jackpot, Kashimo was just very surprised that Hakari was able to hit it. Kashimo says, a last ditch effort domain expansion, but what starts next is the time reduction mode, not the probability change. Even if the spins are faster, the chance of hitting a jackpot is still 1 in 239. So you can tell that Kashimo is basically saying there's no way that Hakari should be able to play his game and hit the jackpot here, because it's just extremely unlikely. But Hakari hits all 2s anyway, hits the jackpot, and Kashimo says, Hakari Kenji, you're truly overwhelmingly lucky. Which is the big thing about Hakari's character. I've seen some people say that the only reason he beat Kashimo is because he got lucky, but that's the point of Hakari's character. He is a lucky person. So going into fights in the future, or just a fight against any opponent, him being lucky is like set before the fight even starts. Another thing that Hakari gains from being in his jackpot state is an infinite amount of curse energy at his disposal. Now I do want to clarify this because there are just a few people that still don't fully understand what they mean by infinite curse energy. They mean that he has a supply of infinite curse energy, not that there is actually an infinite amount of curse energy in Hakari's body at any point in time. Because if you just think about it, Hakari is a finite size of about 6 foot. So there's just no way an infinite amount of curse energy can be in his body. It's more so saying that he can't run out, so it's basically infinite. For 4 minutes and 11 seconds, no matter how much curse energy he uses, he'll just always have more in his body. Now, there is an argument that Hakari is actually faster than Kashimo, and I'll just go ahead and say the argument. You don't have to accept this because it is pretty contentious, but there is a point in the fight where Hakari says that he's going to go hard and heavy, and Kashimo even says himself that Hakari is getting faster, and in this little altercation, Hakari is actually getting the better of Kashimo. But the reason it's so contentious is because even though Hakari is sort of overwhelming him, Kashimo is able to get free and summon a lightning bolt to his side and take his side off. So even though you can sort of say Hakari did get fast or was able to overwhelm Kashimo, it looks like Kashimo had it completely under control, as he was still able to find space, jump backwards, and hit him with a lightning bolt to the side. Now when it comes to Hakari's domain, there is something that is very important that we need to talk about, and that is Viz may have made a mistranslation when talking about Hakari's domain and the way it activates. Because if you look at the scan where it says the sure hit effect of Hakari's domain is harmless, the curse technique's information is forcefully transmitted and activated quickly, there's actually a Jujutsu Kaisen translator on Twitter, and he's very reputable for translating other mistakes that have been made in Jujutsu Kaisen in the past, and he's actually ended up being right with a couple of these. And for this, he says that Viz actually missed out on the translation, that it's actually supposed to say that Hakari's domain is strong in tug of wars. There's an entire thread where he goes over all of the mistakes that it should actually mean, and I'll just put that in the description if you want to check it out for yourself. But the summary of it is, instead of saying that Hakari's domain activation was aggressive, it should have said that in terms of domain clash tug of wars, Hakari's domain is exceptionally strong. Now this next part, the translator does just have this as his own theory, but he thinks that since Hakari's domain is strong in tug of wars, he thinks that Hakari can continue to roll the jackpot even while he's in a domain battle. Now once again, this is all just from Lightning's Twitter, and I will put his Twitter link down in the description if you want to check him out, because he does have good translations, and like I said, there are translation errors in the past that have been corrected by Lightning. Now I did mention it earlier, but when it comes down to the specifics about the Yuta statement, where he says that when Hakari's worked up, he's stronger than he is, I do want to reinforce that this is talking about jackpot Hakari, not base Hakari. But the reason statements like this are so important is because of Yuta's statements that he has himself. One of the most important Yuta statements is the one where it says that he's second to Satoru Gojo. Now, Viz and TCB translate these panels as two different things. Viz says that Yuta is second to Gojo in unusual abilities, and TCB says that Yuta is just second to Gojo. Now, for which one you should believe, you can choose for yourself. I personally trust TCB translations more often than Viz, because Viz has more errors that they've had to go fix in the past. For example, remember back when Kenjaku was talking about what it means to be a special grade? On the Viz translation, for the first entire day, Viz translated that Satoru Gojo had cursed spirit manipulation. Yes, I know it sounds crazy, but Viz did fix it the next day, and there are just other small errors in the past that have been fixed, but more often than not, TCB has been more correct. So if I had to choose a statement to trust, I would go with TCB's translation. The Yuta Okotsu is just the modern sorcerer who's second to Satoru Gojo. And that is why statements about Hakari are so important, because if Yuta is supposed to be second to Gojo, and Hakari on a roll is stronger than this, then it's basically putting Hakari at the top of the verse right below Gojo. And that is why we have to be very specific when looking at translations like this. And like I said before, there is that promotional statement that, you can or cannot accept this. Like I said, I did get this translation from Twitter, but it's just further reinforcing that Hakari on a roll is stronger than Yuta. We also know that Hakari is just physically a beast. When he's fighting against Yuji on the rooftop and he's just in his base form, no jackpot, every time he punches Yuji says, "What's with his punches?" No matter how much or how little strength he puts behind them, they just hurt. It's like he's hitting me with a serrated bat. And Hakari says, "Hurts, right? According to Gojo, my curse energy's got an edge." So it's just crazy how, there are curse energy traits for different sorcerers. Kashimo has an electric curse energy trait to where you're getting shocked when you touch him. And for Hakari, his curse energy trait just has an edge. So even if he doesn't punch you super hard, you still feel like you're getting hit in the face with a bat. We also see this when he's fighting against Charles. Charles says, "What's with his curse energy? It feels like rough sandpaper." So it's just another scenario where this whole curse energy trait thing is just being reinforced. One more just extremely broken factor about Hakari's domain expansion is that as long as he keeps hitting the jackpot, he can just keep opening his domain expansion as many times as he wants to. Because we know that there's this thing in Jujutsu Kaisen where just opening a domain expansion completely drains you of your curse energy to the point where you can't even use your curse technique afterwards. But since Hakari recovers all of his curse energy from being inside of his jackpot state, he can just continue to keep opening domains over and over as long as he keeps hitting the jackpot. So if Hakari's having a lucky day against you, then you're just pretty much going to have to deal with domains the entire fight. Also, when we say that Hakari is extremely lucky, luck for us is not the same way it is for him. What I mean is, if me or you flip a coin, it's just completely up to luck if we call heads or tails. But for Hakari, he says that inside of his domain game, it's never taken him more than 30 tries. And after Charles sort of calls out his luck, he says, if victory depended on skill and not on luck, then perhaps you might have won. Hakari gets back up, hits the jackpot and kicks him in the face, and he says, that's wrong, you need the skill to capitalize on your luck. So we know that even though it is a game, and even though at the end of the day, playing a jackpot game is up to luck, Hakari is so good at his game that even though there's a 1 in 239 chance of hitting the jackpot, he says it's never taken him more than 30 tries to hit it, and that he's very good at capitalizing on his luck. We also know that Hakari isn't just this brawlic, lucky guy, he also just is very smart, especially when it comes to combat. We see that Kashimo gets him in this position where he hits him directly in the head with lightning, and for any other sorcerer, they just basically die here. But for Hakari, because he was able to think in that short amount of time of getting hit by lightning, he expelled the curse energy out of his nose. Kashimo even says, while the damaged brain is healing, he expels my curse energy from his nose. So it's just insane how after being hit by lightning in the head, he was able to quickly think of a plan to expel the curse energy from his body, because had he been even a split second slower, his brain probably would have just exploded, which is why he says right after that Kashimo almost killed him. Another thing that just shows how smart Hakari is when he shifted his barrier coordinates of his domain over the sea, which, by the way, came out of nowhere. I don't think we've ever seen a domain expansion in Jujutsu Kaisen where the person just shifts the coordinates of their domain expansion. But either way, the reason that this plan was so smart is because since Kashimo basically is electricity, putting it in the ocean would make it all dispel. And this is why Kashimo says he's right to throw me into the ocean. Since my curse energy is like electricity, if I even try to use it just once while I'm in the ocean, it won't stop until I'm emptied out. In the ocean, either all my curse energy gets discharged until there's nothing left, or I have to completely cut it off until I get back to shore. So you can see here that somehow in a quick matter of seconds, Hakari thought up of a plan to put this electric fighter he's up against in the water so the electricity can go out. But there is one thing that Hakari did not account for, and that is all of the fumes that rise out of the ocean because of what Kashimo was doing by putting all of his electricity into it. Now we see that the fumes actually hit Hakari and he begins to sink into the ocean, and we get an explanation here. It says electrolysis is like chlorine gas. Chlorine gas is the first deadly poison humans used as a chemical weapon. Kashimo Hajime tries to suppress his leaking curse energy the best he can while performing electrolysis on seawater to create chlorine gas. And we see that Kashimo actually says the ways you can kill a reverse curse technique user, besides taking their brain out in a single hit, there's also poison. Unlike simple regrowth of the body, it takes a much more advanced form of reverse curse technique to remove the source of the poison from the body. So we see that Kashimo basically thinks that he's got it all done here. He doesn't think that Hakari can deal with the poison on his own, and he even looks Hakari in the face and says it was fun. But Hakari just expels curse energy out of his nose, punches Kashimo in the face, and we see Kashimo is so surprised, he says, "No way, this guy's reverse curse technique is fully automatic, so even identifying and clearing a poison from his system is something that he can do subconsciously despite not even being awake." It's just so crazy how Hakari was able to remove poison from his body while he was knocked out. His body subconsciously was able to identify the poison in his head and remove it on its own. Now this does lead to Kashimo making this huge explosion in the sea. He just wants to blow up Hakari all at once. At first he actually thinks that he succeeded in beating Hakari. He thinks that he's blown him up. But we see that Hakari just pops up and punches Kashimo as he hops out of the water. And Hakari basically breaks it down to him. He says, "You didn't want me to expand my domain again no matter what, because it would have been a probability change next. So even if I survived the explosion, you'd make sure to take out my arm to keep me from making the hand seal. So I sacrificed my left arm, that way I'd protect the rest of my body." And Kashimo just sort of breaks it down by saying Hakari used an impromptu binding vow, sacrificing his arm in order to put all of the curse energy throughout his body so he could protect himself. And it's just so crazy how just seeing Kashimo start to make this explosion, Hakari was able to think quick enough to make a binding vow and protect his body. It's just another insanely fast thinking feat for Hakari. The first one being removing the lightning from his head, and the second one being this. Just in the matter of about half a second, he was able to come up with an entire plan of making a binding vow, sacrificing his arm to live. It's just sort of breaking that stereotype that Hakari is all luck and not skill, which you have to remember Hakari is just very good when it comes to mixed martial arts. Hand-to-hand combat, Hakari does have good technique, but not just that, he is also extremely smart, which is why he ultimately was able to beat Kashimo. And Kashimo's no small fry, even though we don't know what his grade was back in the day. Based on the Hakari statements, Yuta statements, and the fight that we saw, I would say that Kashimo is probably low special grade, probably around a Yuta Yuki level, because of how well he performed in his fight with Hakari. And we also do know that Kashimo is actively trying to fight Sukuna, where he wants to use his curse technique in that fight, which is another just very impressive thing about the fight with Hakari. Kashimo didn't even use his curse technique, so although we don't know what it is yet, for the simple fact that he performed so well without it against Hakari and he was scaling to Hakari, with his curse technique, I have no doubt Kashimo for sure is special grade. Now, for what it comes to Hakari's role in the future of the manga, there are a couple things we have to take into account, especially for Hakari as a character. We know that he actually cares for his friends and the Jujutsu Society to some extent, especially if you see the hospital scene where they're all trying to get Gojo back. We see that Hakari is right there with him, and he's willing to help them fight against the antagonist. And we also do know that there's just no way a big fight goes down and Hakari will just sit on the sidelines and watch. So remember how I said Gojo and Sukuna are going to end up fighting? That leaves Kenjaku for Hakari and Yuta, and I just don't think that there's a world in which Hakari just sits on the sidelines and watches the entire fight go down. The only way I can see Hakari sort of giving Yuta the 1v1 with Kenjaku is if Yuta outright tells him to just let him 1v1, but I also do see a scenario where Yuta and Hakari just agree that Kenjaku is a big threat, and there's no point in me just 1v1ing him when we can both just jump him and up our chances of winning the fight. So I do think that Hakari's role in the future of the manga will probably be fighting against Kenjaku, or possibly a new character comes along, which honestly would sort of fit the plot right now, because there is going to be a month of downtime in the verse where Gojo and Sukuna aren't going to be near each other. So for this entire month of downtime, there could be an introduction of a new calling game sorcerer who just hasn't shown their face yet. And I know this may sound a bit crazy, like how can there be another special grade level calling game sorcerer out there? It's actually not too crazy because we know that Yorozu sort of laid low until it was time to pop out and win over Sukuna. So if Yorozu can lay low for such a long time and we know that she's super strong, I definitely see a scenario where there is another super strong sorcerer out there who's just been laying low. So for all the reasons I spoke about, like his domain activation being strong in Tug of Wars, how he can just keep hitting jackpots over and over, how smart he is in combat, you know, the effects of his domain jackpot like infinite curse energy amount and automatic reverse curse technique, along with how Hakari isn't just lucky, he also just uses skill to grab a hold of luck. When it comes to him fighting people in the future, I honestly would bet on Hakari, and you probably should too. And thank you for making it to the end of the video, and if you enjoyed, then please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as I do post every couple of days on different topics you guys give me and a few I come up with on my own. Thank you for watching, see you next time.